All right, team, I think we'll get started there. Are you ready to go, Roland? Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. We are going to talk through today, I guess what we're seeing is the background as to why attribution has become quite a large challenge and problem for a lot of different businesses, particularly businesses that have a slightly longer consideration cycle for their conversions. And we're going to talk through in partnership with Adfixus, what we're seeing is sort of what the sort of foundational fix for getting a really clear view of your attribution pathways are. Presenting today, we have myself. So I sort of, well, I'm Global Director of Strategy and Success for XPON Technologies. My role really is to sort of sit at the center of customer, business, and technology, and try and bring all of that together in a way that makes sense and drives growth and value for the clients that we work with. So that's me. Roland, do you want to do a quick intro for yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So Roland Irwin, I'm Head of Sales and Marketing for Adfixus. And again, I've been working with Tom for a long time and now with the XPON guys, and really excited about this opportunity to kind of bring to life where we fit in and help people kind of solve one of the biggest problems probably going around the industry at the moment around attribution.
Awesome. All right, so agenda for today, we are going to talk a little bit about the background, the attribution crisis that we just touched upon, and sort of why it's broken down across multiple industries. We'll talk a little bit about the root cause and run you through sort of a high-level view of what's actually happening to your customer journey data and why that's not really coming together in the sort of in the view that's valuable to you guys to make decisions. We're going to go through what we see as the best fix for that. And it's a combination of different, I guess, bits of data and bits of technology to enhance your ability to track customer pathways and customer journeys, and then what a typical implementation roadmap looks like. So the sort of high-level activities that you need to go through, the things you need to be thinking about, the tech you need to start investigating and potentially investing in. And then at the end, we'll leave a bit of time for some Q&A for you guys to throw us any questions. Hopefully, nothing too curly. I know enough about the tech to be dangerous. But if anything really funky comes along, we're happy to put you in touch with some of the really techie people at our end to field some of those questions as well. So the crisis. Let's start this with a little bit of background because there's sort of like there is I guess a macro shift that's really fueling this, right? And it's to do with the sort of ever increasing knowledge of consumers around how their data is being used and how data privacy is sort of reshaping collection and usage. And we're sort of being led by the nose by the increased awareness and knowledge that the average Joe has about how data is used and collected by different businesses and different organizations. And the fact that they're increasingly wanting the ability and the right to ask effectively to be forgotten, and that's how the whole right to be forgotten concept around GDPR came around and things like that, which is one of the more leading pieces of legislation about that over in the EU. So there's that component, right, and that is then forcing tech providers to then react to that essentially, and so. That then means that the tech providers are putting increased limitations on what you can and can't do with data, how long it lasts for and persists for in things like cookies and stuff like that, and that then is having an impact to measurement and attribution, because gone are the good old days where you could slap a cookie down or a pixel down and then track your customers through every single component of their journey and then retarget them whenever you want and target them almost on a one-to-one basis. You can't really do that anymore. And the biggest casualty of that is your ability to make decisions, right? And your ability to react and allocate budget effectively based on like a true view of marketing ROI, essentially. So where we're at now is that essentially most attribution solutions only really get a 7-day snapshot, sometimes less. And what that looks like from a customer journey perspective is, on day one, we might have a customer seeing a LinkedIn ad. And this example, this customer journey will sort of be prevalent throughout the presentation so that we're all sort of talking about the same thing and how the solution comes together to resolve that, by the way. So day one, customer sees a LinkedIn ad, visits sites, leaves. Day 5, they might see a retargeting ad. They return to the website, they browse a bit. They might then, a few days later, they might, life happens, they go off and do something else, they come back, or they receive an email. They click the email, they maybe read a case study or a news article or something like that that's been put out by your business. They're interested in that, but they don't do anything with it. And then all of a sudden one day something pops into their head. They're like, I meant to continue that purchase path. I meant to go and buy that thing or sign up for that thing or whatever. And then they do a brand search because they remember your brand name because they've interacted with a bunch of ads and things, and then they convert, right? Attribution will only really show the last bit of that. And what's worse is like you essentially only get one touch point of visibility in that conversion. So effectively what your attribution is showing you is they did a brand search and then they converted, which is a great news story for brand search, right? But when you go into your budget meeting and you are assessing, what budget you need to allocate for the next quarter or whatever for something like paid social, like your LinkedIn ads, all you're seeing is effectively a campaign failure there. And the decisions that get made off the back of that are, okay, well, let's allocate more budget to brand name search and top keyword search to capture that because that's performing well because effectively last touch. And you're reducing the budget on all of the touch points that actually contributed very heavily to that sort of top of funnel conversion process. Which in reality, we're not quite as blind as this because all the platforms themselves, you can go in and see that, in the LinkedIn advertising platform that they're saying that there's clicks made and things like that. So it's not quite as, blind as I'm making out, but what you are getting is a very fragmented view of the customer journey, and you can't really make decisions off the back of that. You can't understand what percentage of the conversion revenue, for example, you could allocate towards your LinkedIn or your top of funnel activity, right? And that's the challenge that we're facing. So I talked a little bit about budget misallocation when we talk about the cost of this sort of broken process. We talked a bit about flawed decision making. Optimization issues, so your ability to go in and actually tweak and manage and optimize the customer journey as campaigns are in flight over a period of time is significantly flawed and hampered because you're missing key insights around what customers are doing and and crucially what stage of the journey they're taking those actions, because every single one of those journey steps is effectively a single isolated touch point. So you don't know what order they're happening in, and you don't know what, how to quantify the impact that they're having on the journey. And that ultimately puts you in a position where you're at a competitive disadvantage because competitors who have solved this are able to make better decisions. Better measurement equals better marketing is generally equals better growth, right? So those are the sort of high-level costs that we're seeing. So that's the problem. We've set the scene. Let's talk a little bit about what is happening behind the scenes so that we can sort of level set everybody's knowledge here. So this is the same customer journey that I talked through before. This is how it used to be back in what I call the good old days when we didn't care so much about privacy. So obviously that's not great, but back when we could actually measure this relatively easily. We had long cookie life cycles, so it didn't matter if it was a first-party cookie or a third-party cookie. You could have effectively an infinite life cycle on it, so that there was constant tracking, constant data collection across the different platforms. So your every single touch point it was the days of having many pixels on your website, all collecting data, which obviously had a massive issue with slowing down your websites, but it did allow you to collect a bunch of data about everything. So your social ad. Click to the website, that would then collect data, right? Your website, your display retargeting would capture data. You could embed pixels within your display retargeting back then. Your email clicks would then get attributed back. And so you'd get this very, very clear, unfragmented journey all the way through to conversion. And then you could apportion a revenue number or to a value to that conversion and be able to trace that back across the journey and allocate value to each touch point. So that's how that used to work. Now, we're basically in a situation where cookies life cycles are 7 days or less. Third-party cookies are basically binned off the bat. They're blocked by the majority of browsers now. Cross-device tracking is completely broken, so you don't really have any ability to understand that somebody in that 4 to 5 p.m. slump at the end of their day at work was going through a top of funnel and researching your products potentially, and then when they get home, they open it up on a mobile and then convert, right? Two different people acting, right? You don't have that visibility anymore. And so ultimately all you're getting in this diagram here is effectively glorified last touch attribution, where your conversion is fully attributed to your organic search result or your brand search result or whatever the last touch point happened to be, right? And the other thing is that your numbers are massively inflated here, because every single touch point is actually a new person. So the person who clicked on the social ad on LinkedIn in this example and then went to your website is effectively person ABC. And then the person who then clicked on the retargeting ad and went, and then the email and then landed on the website after that is person XYZ. And the person that ultimately ended up converting is person 1, 2, 3. And then you've got 3 different records, I guess, of an interaction or happening that were actually the same person, but have been logged as 3 different people. So your numbers are extremely inflated as well. So I've set the scene. Hopefully that made sense to everybody. I'm going to hand over to Roland now to talk through how Adfixus's first-party ID solution sort of comes to the rescue here.
Thanks, Tom. You put a little bit of a bleak picture in the landscape, but it's reality as well. And this hasn't happened overnight. We've all seen this happening over the last couple of months to years as the browsers have slowly deprecated what they're doing. But they've done it for 2 reasons. And one is that, as we mentioned, those third-party cookies was data leakage more than anything else. No one knew where the data was going. Your data was getting resold multiple times over without anyone knowing or consenting to that. And that's why these browsers have stepped in. And of course, we've seen the Australian government make some steps in this direction. They're not quite there yet, but I think the industry kind of believes that we'll end up in some state sooner rather than later around a consented audience of people coming onto websites. So we know these kind of issues are at play and these kind of things are coming into market. What are we going to do about it, right? The other one also is that not all cookies are created equal, is the way to think about it. So third-party cookies we know have been banned and have got problems around them and data leakage and ownership and consent. First-party cookies are fine. First-party cookies are not at threat here, and first-party cookies aren't at risk of being deprecated through any means, as long as it's consented, is the way that we think about it. So what's a first-party cookie? A first-party cookie is one that is generated from your domains. You have the ownership of that data. And if you read any of the browser deep information they provide, I suggest you don't because it's quite boring and tedious, but they all suggest that first-party cookies are fine and you will not have any signal loss as long as that ID is being generated from your system to being that true, stable first-party ID or cookie that you guys have in the market. So what's a durable ID? It's a first-party privacy-compliant identifier that you own that data. It comes from your infrastructure. And through that, you get a lot of benefits. One, you get that persistence for like a rolling 12-month window. So as long as you see that user return within inside 12 months, it just refreshes and goes for another 12 months again. That's a browser restriction more than anything else, where you need to see that person within inside 12 months, but it just refreshes and goes again. The ability here to connect across your own brands as well. It's a feature that we have within inside our system, that if you have multiple brands or multiple domains that you want to kind of link together in an anonymous process, it's a kind of like a single ID or a single view of the browser is the way to think about it, because these are browser specific IDs. And we'll get to later about how we can connect these together across browsers, like Tom said before, if you do have people logging onto your desktop and onto your mobile phone. The other one is respecting user consent. So we all see a lot of websites now locally launching consent banners, even it's acknowledgement of cookie policies from a base level, but all the way through to people now deploying things like consent management platforms, and the ability for people to consent to a cookie policy and also privacy policy at the same time is now coming into market. And we think that's going to continue because we think the government will at some stage launch tranche 2, which will require most businesses to do this moving forward. The other one, it's your ID, you've deployed it, so you own it, right? So you can actually integrate that into your back office systems, whether that be into GA, into your CDP, whatever it might be, you own it. It has the durability, it's your ID, it's not changing, it's not encrypting, it's not running out. You own that ID and it gets deployed through what your systems are doing. Want to go to the next one, Tom? So how's that different? Well, this is deterministic. So it's not probabilistic matching where you might see other people doing it, where they're grabbing different bits of ID or influence and kind of stitching that together through an algorithmic process to make a single ID across what you're doing. So probabilistic is under consideration in tranche 2, something to be aware of. The privacy and governance already comes into play. As I said before, we see a lot of people doing just acknowledgement of that browser, acknowledgement of the cookie policy, and then it's a user action to accepting or consenting to that cookie policy being done. And I'll give you some examples of that later if you want. It is all true first party, so it's your ID. You own it, it's double encrypted and centralized. That rolling 12-month window I said, which is comparatively, we have some clients now with like a 3.5-year cookie window, is a way to think about it. But most people, if you're running Safari today, you're only going to see 7 days. And after that, it reseeds, it's a brand new ID, you get duplication in your system, and it's running all the way through. But the big one here is that from our side, from what we do, we can't even see your data. So you take the ownership of that data. We can't see it, store it, or commercialize it. You own it, and you can run with it wherever you want inside your system, and utilization externally as well, which we can touch on later if you want. Let's just compare the two, right? So as I said before, third-party cookies, generally deemed bad, poor for the business, but everyone went that way because they're free, got great utilization out of them, but the privacy was the real problem here. In things like Safari and other browsers today where they are having third-party cookie restrictions, it's only a 7-day lifespan. So as I said before, if you have multiple domains, and I'm on Safari, on day 1, I'm an ID, on day 8, I'm another ID. If I go to another one of your domains, it's a third ID, day 8 again, you're 4 IDs. This kind of multiplies out depending how many times a person visits, but also the frequency they visit and how many domains you have. You can see this bloating of IDs going to people's systems. So it is a real problem, and it's probably a cost to your business as well. That 12-month rolling lifespan, as mentioned, it's a browser specific problem, not a technical problem, but it gives you great durability. And for someone who has a long buying cycle, a long consideration set, buying a car is usually 6 to 7 months, buying finance could be, I think, around either 5 days or 6 months. There's kind of journeys that people go on. And if you're losing visibility of those people, how do you control that personalization? How do you drive them through to what you want them to do on your website? And how do you get that understanding also from the attribution for the money you're spending and the way that they're engaging back and forward between publisher and your brand really comes into light here. The first-party platform also, the ID also connects into your known audience as well. So when you do authenticate, that ID then gets joined in through your CDP or the like, and that join happens so you get the historical information of the people coming through. And then when they authenticate, you've seen that end-to-end from unknown to known, and then you can act on those other known identifiers as well. If you do want to match or collaborate with other people with hashed email addresses, hashed mobile phone numbers, or other identifiers, that all stitches together in your CDP, and you get activation out of that as well. The privacy compliance by design is super important, very important in Australia at the moment, because we think that is all coming near future, and we see a lot of people moving already. So they do have an audience that is consented and has utilization when law does come into pass. The ability also to do cross-domain is really important. We have a number of our clients now that have multiple domain approaches, multiple brands. Trying to put those together when they're all unknown has been historically very problematic. So we bring those kind of capabilities where it's the same ID across all the different domains as you're going through. So you get that single ID through your audience build out and those sorts of things as well. Third-party cookies are disappearing on Safari and other browsers today. Google, we all know the rodeo they took us through a long process of, yes, we're going to do it, no, we're not going to do it, we're back again. See how that plays out over time. As that process kind of rolls out, we believe that users have fundamentally suggested that this is a problem area for us. They don't like the data leakage. I think it's like 70–80% of Australians have all acknowledged that this is a real problem. So we'll just have to see what that happens in the future. But the Australian government is highly likely to step in at some stage and go around that consented audience. And it's future-proof as well. As I said, it aligns with everything we're seeing in the industry and in the local governments. Let's bring this back to the use case now. So as we said before, where the fragmented journey started breaking down because the cookies were getting blocked all over the place, we bring back visibility and bring back some of that signal loss. So you can see here this kind of stitch back together again, where you can see that this journey becomes, you can see what's happening again because we have this durable ID running across your system over an elongated period of time. So the journey persists. As I said, 12 months, rolling 12 months, as long as that person comes back again, you'll see that person back on your website engaging with your site. You can understand what those people are doing and where your marketing efforts are working and not working. It's privacy compliant on the way through. It integrates with what you're doing in the background. So the likes, XPON are really good at now pulling that data out, using the information you have, and then drawing out these attributions to actually show you what's going on for your marketing efforts. We all know, well, I think it's generally across the board that marketing dollars aren't going up. So the ability to squeeze that better, understand what's going on, and actually place the dollars where it's actually going to be meaningful for you, I think is one of the things we just need to get right at the moment, because there's a lot of media wastage still out there and spend going elsewhere because people don't understand what's working, what's not working, and where that attribution can lie and where you can actually make those bets and spend that money, which is being restricted, but still the outcomes are still desired from the C-level suite to make sure those marketing dollars are going in the right direction. The other one there is the ability, our ID does have the availability to connect into some premium publishers in market. So the ability to run conversion-based tagging back into publishers so you can get outcome-based campaigns up and running is something that's really important. And we see that's a good competitive set against the likes of Meta and the others to leverage the local publishing. Next one. So drawing it back together so we can understand how this kind of fits with kind of the layout we had from the beginning. It is a first party, it's privacy from the ground up. That consent is on the way in. The way that happens, it's a single first time action on the way in. So the first time the visitor comes to your website, they're acknowledging that cookie policy or even going all the way through to the consent management. That then maintains for the rolling 12 months as well. So it's not this multiple kind of refresh like you might see on some of the GDPR version sites where they're asking you every 7 or 8 days to reconfirm your consent. That's a one-time consent on the way through, and then that sticks for the whole way through. We, as a business, are GDPR compliant. We've been through that with some local Australian government reviews and the whatnot, and we do have customers over in the US as well. So from all the global big compliance and privacy statements that are out there, we are compliant. For each of them have been ticked off by different legal teams, which is great. So we think that what will eventuate in Australia eventually is something that will fit within that same similar framework. So we're very confident we'll be passed through that without any worries. Again, as long as that consent is there, we don't see any issue. And then user rights are enabled. So they have the right to access this. They have the right to delete what they're doing as well. You can opt out. You can have do not track, do not follow, whatever you want. Do not use my data. That's all part of our solution as well. For when we do that deployment, the user action's there, and that then flows through into what's happening. This, of course, is your digital journey. What you also need is to bring this all together, which is why we're excited to work with the guys from XPON, because working with something like Wondrous and the CDP solution brings it all back together again. As we said from the get-go, this is our solution from Adfixus is browser-based. But what happens if you are on your desktop, there on your mobile phone? The only way to really stitch that together is either through some kind of probabilistic matching or to get people to authenticate. And when they authenticate, they go into a CDP. And that's where the join happens. And that's why we're really excited about this work, is the ability to go from offline and to online together to bring all this back together again. So if you take that use case kind of figuratively in your head, if you go into the site, ID gets created, you're then going off and doing something else, the ability to store that together went through in a known audience is really important. And as I said, if you authenticate on your desktop, and then you authenticate on your mobile device, the CDP is the part that join that together. So you become one profile in that statement where the two Adfixus IDs get joined back down to one. And you can see that's a single user. So we go from a single view of the browser to a single view of the user, is the way to think about it. There's a bunch of use cases here around CDPs where we can kind of draw them out, but it's kind of that where it all fits back together again. So you can actually now go from digital to offline, offline to digital, whatever it might be, and have that stitch in the middle from unknown to known is the really important part. And if you just go one more, Tom.
Yeah, cool. I might actually call out a couple of scenarios there, if you don't mind, Rob. A few popped into my head while you were talking. There's a few areas two areas really where we see this really actually having a solid, measurable, fundamental shift in how marketing and sales teams are interacting particularly. One area is in retail, and one area is in any organization that operates on a sort of account-based marketing and account-based sales approach. So I'll touch on the retail one first. We work with a client that has a retail point of sale system that has the ability to collect phone numbers for digital receipts. So, but quite often, as the behavior sort of shows now that we've been able to stitch it together, a lot of people will research what a retail organization sells online first, and then check whether there's stock in store. And then obviously they might want to go, if it's clothing, they might want to go and try it on. If it's a product, they might want to go and see it. And so it's historically been quite hard for them to understand how those in-store purchases have been influenced by digital marketing, essentially. So being able to stitch all that information together and have the POS digital receipt system pushing an identifier into Wondrous, and then combining the Wondrous and the Adfixus durable ID to stitch those two journeys together, so you get a full offline touch point all the way through to in-store purchase, was incredibly valuable for some of the retail customers that we work with. So that's the retail one, and then the sales component one is quite often, particularly in organizations that leverage account-based marketing, you'll have the idea that marketing's role or responsibility is to generate marketing qualified leads and push those into a Salesforce or a CRM of some kind, HubSpot, whatever. And then the sales team will then pick that up and run with it. And typically those sales conversations happen via phone, via email, whatever. And having the sales team be able to understand how the customer has interacted with the brand up until that point, what they've looked at, what they've interacted with, emails that they've, content that they might have interacted with, and things like that, has fundamentally shifted the way they tailor communications to their sales prospects. Because instead of going from a generic outreach message, say with a LinkedIn message, you know that they looked at a specific piece of content related to a problem that they might have been having. And you can tailor your outreach based on that. So there's that side of it as well, which has been quite a fundamental shift in customers that we work with. So there's just two examples that might just sort of bring it to life for you guys. Back over to you, Roland.
Perfect. Next slide. I think you've just done this job for me anyway, Tom. So the ability to actually then stitch this back together is the really important part. So it is having that full visibility, that ID spine that sits behind everything you do, from unknown all the way through to known. And how you have those kind of IDs unified, and then you just get to choose which one you want to use and leverage in kind of what you're doing. Bringing this back down to how you can actually work from attribution point of view, it's just having those data signals and visibility back again, bringing back that signal loss into your databases, whether it be analytics or some other data warehouse, you have that stored, and the ability to track this all the way through from end to end with a durable ID to kind of extend about what people are looking at. So you can see people as they do touch and engage with your brand and your websites over a longitudinal period. That's what we're bringing. That's what we brought to market here, and you can understand how it kind of fits together well with what's going on from a known point of view as well, and how you can have that end-to-end journey.
It's on to me, I think, isn't it? Cool. So having been on this journey a few times now, we've got a bit of an implementation framework, and I touched on this in the intro and the agenda slides, but on average, when you're trying to implement this sort of solution, you're looking at a 4-phase process over somewhere between 10 and 12 weeks, depending on usually IT red tape around data access and implementation bits and pieces. But where we usually like to start is with an assessment. So we can't really figure out where the problems are and how to improve it unless we understand your current visibility over your customer journeys. So we like to map sort of customer journey length versus the attribution windows to work out what portions of the customer journey you're likely to be missing. And that then gives us an indication of what sort of, durable ID supported attribution we'd look to implement for you. And then it also allows us to sort of calculate the business impacts of measurement gaps. Now, it's worth noting that assessment can form, I guess, the basis of a business case if you're sort of struggling to bring the business along on the journey as to how valuable and important this is. That assessment is essentially forms the guts of the business case there. And once you've got that business case and rallied the business around it, we then go into foundational setup. So implementing durable ID infrastructure in partnership with Adfixus. That implementation, what's your average implementation time for getting durable ID up and running? It's pretty quick, right?
Yeah. The effort is reasonably easy. We say 2 to 4
versus time, right?
2 to 4 weeks. The hardest part is usually finding the people to actually do the job and to align with a website release or whatever. But yeah, 2 to 4 weeks.
Yep, awesome. So within that sort of average 2 to 4 week time frame, at the end of that, we end up getting a durable ID surfaced in a place where we can grab it, either in your tag manager or in a CDP if you're collecting event level data in your CDP, and then that can then be distributed out to key platforms, analytics or CRM or and so on and so forth. And then we can configure off the back of that cross-device matching. And this is where having a platform like a CDP that can connect and resolve multiple IDs into one unified customer record is really valuable, because you might have different authentication methods or different customer IDs being captured, like an email address versus a phone number, and being able to resolve those all up into one place. And that's part of what the foundational setup entails, is working out what the I guess what the ID stitching priority and mechanisms need to look like. And then we also build into that a privacy and consent framework. So we can and do integrate with things like OneTrust, which allows us to build in the business rules that you guys have around different markets that you operate in, and making sure that those business rules around privacy and consent and I guess data usage are propagated across the different systems at a per user level, which is really quite important, because if you capture somebody's consent on one device and then you don't capture it on another, you're effectively treating those two people as two different people with different consent preferences, right? So there's a consideration there, and we sort of try and build in a model that mitigates that. And then we go into the attribution integration piece. Now, there's a few different attribution mechanisms we can use. Durable ID sort of is forming the backbone of that now. We tend to, XPON, lean quite heavily towards a multi-touch attribution model called fractribution, which is a mechanism that was originally published by Google, which allows you to effectively do user level attribution of different touch points throughout a customer journey. Now, that obviously is impossible without some sort of durable ID, for all the reasons we've already talked about in this conversation. But being able to I guess integrate that, or maybe you already have an attribution model and you just need to increase the resolution of it, right? And so we can work with that as well. Do sort of historical journey data backfilling where possible, so we can bring in additional data sets like your historical GA data, validate it all, make sure it all makes sense, and then continue to iterate on it going forwards, and then we optimize it. So the fourth stage is around ongoing optimization, analyzing the insights from that, building out dashboards and reports, embedding the capability into your teams, because there's no point in having a shiny attribution dashboard if nobody's making any decisions off the back of it, and giving you guys, I guess, insight that we have across having worked with multiple different organizations across different sectors and industries into how they are getting value from this capability and how they are building attribution into their decision-making processes. So that's sort of the four-stage implementation process, as I sort of alluded to, depending on red tape and approvals and access to tech and people and things like that. Typically, it can take sort of 10 to 12 weeks. But to get to that sort of the end of stage 3, I guess, which is when you have a system up and running, and then the optimization pieces tends to be a bit more of an ongoing process. You want to say something?
We've got some questions. Do you want to take them in the experience we have?
Can attribution be done at a post-view level, or can you only measure post-click? Adam, I'm going to come back to that towards the end, if that's all right. All right, so key takeaways. Attribution is broken industry-wide. Roland said I was painting a bleak picture, but it's a realistic one, unfortunately. the combination of all the things we've discussed today is essentially means that we need to pivot. Pivoting involves upskilling knowledge, capability, and adopting new ways of doing things. The problem isn't actually your attribution model; it's the data that it's getting. I think that's fairly clear. We have a fairly significant 7-day blind spot, which means that unless you sell a product where there is a very short consideration journey, you are missing data. Essentially, you're lacking visibility into your purchase journeys. Implementing some form of durable ID is the fix. You need a way to identify people in a privacy compliant way, leveraging first-party cookies, because as Roland mentioned before, those are the ones that are not under fire as yet. And then the ROI is quite clear on this. Being able to make better decisions, allocate budget more effectively, and just gain greater visibility and reduce blind spots. There's very clear ROI and very clear business outcomes there. Roland, anything you wanted to add to the key takeaways there? You're on mute.
No, I think you got it all. Perfect.
Cool. All right, questions. We've got a couple in the questions here. Do you want to take one of these, Roland?
Sure. There's a couple. There's one in the chat as well. So I'll take the one in the chat first. Let me just go back to that one. How exactly is the Adfixus ID from desktop stitched with the Adfixus ID 2 on mobile to regain the single profile? It is not through us. That is, we deliver that into 2 different IDs that get deployed. It's when the user authenticates on both devices is when that stitch happens. So that normally happens in a CDP. So as you authenticate, the ID that is on that device in that browser gets pulled into that profile store, if you want, to create that. And then almost all CDPs have the ID that flows with that. And then you get that single view across mobile and desktop. But it has to happen through authentication. Otherwise, it becomes probabilistic, not deterministic. So that's the way that we deal with it. That's why we work so well with guys like with Wondrous and things like that from a CDP's perspective. The other one back on the question side from I'll take Adam's one first. Can attribution be done at a post-view level, or can it only measure post-click? With our ID, you can see post-view is the way to think about it. So it's post-view and post-click because we're seeing the user come back across different states, across different times they come back. It's post-view, and you'll be able to see, so you can have a campaign that delivers the person to your website, and then that just goes directly back to you. You can actually see the attribution of that as the person comes back time and time again over that kind of rolling 12-month window. Anything you wanted to add to that one, Tom?
Nope. Do you want to take the Triple M one, or do you want me to do it?
Yep, you go.
Yeah, cool. Jason, question from you. How can digital attribution support broader Triple M models? We tend to take I guess a macro versus micro view on this. So your Triple M models give you really good insight into, I guess, trend level data around the impacts that your all sorts of different marketing channels are having. And then once you've got those insights, you then use MTA and digital attribution to dive into, I guess, the next level down, because you're getting, you're able to overlay the key, I guess, behavioral segments that you're seeing from Triple M over the top of that MTA data to get a more granular view of what's actually happening at the individual touch point level. So that's typically how we see them interacting with each other. We've got a couple of playbooks. We've actually executed some playbooks and some, I guess, some operational cadences around the intersection of Triple M and MTA, supported by durable ID. So Jason, if you're interested, I'm happy to reach out with a bit more information about that. Question from Adam, is it possible to integrate data from dealer-owned websites, e.g. for a car brand who has their own website, but then individual dealerships also have their own websites? So we're almost talking like a publisher brand relationship. Roland, you look like you've got something you want to say here.
Yeah, we've got quite a lot of automotive clients using our service, Adam. So this does come up a bit because most of the time you don't buy from a car brand, you buy from the dealership. So how does that organization happen? So in our world, this is probably another conversation. But we can actually convert one ID into the other because we are double encrypted on the way through. There's actually a way that we can actually join these things back up again, still in a privacy safe manner. So in this idea, if XY or Acme Automotive is selling the car and then you have to go through to the dealership, we could actually convert the dealership ID back to the car brand ID to kind of have that attribution flow all the way through. That can be done. It's probably for a deeper conversation. The possibilities there, it still all happens in a privacy safe way, but I kind of touched on it lightly around the ability to connect to publishers and or partners. But I think we should have that one conversation exterior from this call. But it's possible.
Cool. Any other
questions?
Going once. All right, I think we'll call it a wrap there, guys. Thank you so much for your for all your attention and your time. We massively appreciate it. Hopefully what we said makes sense. If any of you want any, I guess, if you come up with any follow-up questions or you'd like a little bit more information around what we've discussed today, how it maybe applies in a little bit more detail to your businesses in particular, please do reach out. We're always happy to have a chat and a bit of a yarn about it. And yeah, we'll circulate the content, and I think there'll be a recording that will go around as well for anybody who couldn't make it. And once again, thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks, Tom.